Star Wars Jedi Knight series is one of the best Star Wars games of all time. Wait, no, let me fix that. They're some of the best games of all time, with Jedi Outcast being one of those games. The early 2000s was the golden age of gaming. Almost every game that was released was pushing the boundaries of quality and replayability that still hold up to this day, and in some cases far exceed some games made today. They accomplished all of these innovations with only a fraction of the hardware we have today. Let that sink in for a moment. Unfortunately though, innovation is pretty rare now. Star Wars games were incredibly popular and were made quite regularly in the early 2000s. Star Wars was a flourishing prospect in the gaming industry, and that is all thanks to the huge innovations they did, with most of those innovations being focused on gameplay. Why, you may ask? Because these are video games, not interactive movies like some other games these days. Star Wars games have become a really low priority and are not developed anywhere near as often as they should, which is unfortunate since we currently live in a time where we have plenty of Star Wars content to go through, with even more on the way. But all of them are things like TV shows and movies. Now, that's all well and good, and I do enjoy them, but I want more interactive Star Wars content as well. Now, let's go back in time and appreciate the history of the Jedi Knight series that would eventually birth one of the best games of all time, Star Wars Jedi Outcast, and later its sequel, Jedi Academy. The Jedi Knight series started all the way back in 1995 with the release of Star Wars Dark Forces, which was the first Star Wars FPS game ever made, and you can easily guess why. That's thanks to the grandfather of all shooter games, Doom. A sequel for Dark Forces would then be developed and released in late 1997, called Jedi Knight Dark Forces II. A few months later, an expansion pack would be released called Jedi Knight Mysteries of the Sith, and then there was silence until March 2001, where LucasArts announced that Raven Software was working on a new sequel in the Jedi Knight series named Jedi Outcast, and will continue the story of Kyle Katarn, who is the main character of the Jedi Knight series up until Jedi Academy, where he becomes a highly prominent supporting character. The game would be released on March 26, 2002, which is almost 20 goddamn years ago from this video. Jedi Outcast was released around the same time as other well-known and notable games such as Medal of Honor Allied Assault, Spider-Man 1, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, Kingdom Hearts, and Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, among many more. As you can see, Jedi Outcast had some decent competition to go against, and yet it still performed quite well throughout reviews. But in this day and age, this game is all but forgotten about, and I hope to remind people that played it before, and hopefully introduce new people to this amazing series. Now, since I'm not a professional reviewer or anything like other professional companies, I'll be structuring this video in a systematic and logical way. So let's start with the download, installation, and fixes of the game for the PC version. So overall, the download of the game was pretty straightforward because I bought the game on Steam, and last I checked, the game is still available on the platform. It has a file size of roughly 800 megabytes. That's it. Now, as expected, because the game is so old, the game does not natively support higher widescreen resolutions, but thankfully a fix was pretty easy to do. You just have to modify some configuration files within the directory and set a few values to your native resolution. If you're someone that still plays older games, this should be pretty standard stuff. The instructions on fixing and troubleshooting the game are in the description, so make sure to go check it out. So now that I had applied the fix, the game was ready for me to enjoy. So let's start with the story. So once you launch the game, the first thing you'll notice is this nice looking main menu. Main menus in this day and age are far more minimalistic, which is something that I have always preferred. But I still remember back when I first launched this game as a kid, the symbol rotating over a pure blue background was something that my young mind was very easily impressed with. Then, once you start the campaign, you're met with the iconic Star Wars crawl, giving you a brief insight on what has happened so far and where the game will pick up. and that's because the story is a direct continuation from the prequel games, and this is one of the things I most love about games from that era. Their stories were very straightforward, and anything you needed to know happened within the game. You didn't have to go buy separate books or 1,000 of them just to understand what the hell is actually going on. The story of Jedi Outcast itself takes about 15 hours to complete on normal difficulty, especially if it's your first time. Most of that time that you'll be spending will be on exploration, trust me on that. So what happens in the prequel games? Well, the very short version is that Kyle's father, Morgan Katarn, was one of the only people in the galaxy that knew the coordinates to the most sacred place to the Jedi Order, called the Valley of the Jedi. This area has a strong connection to the Force, and a group of Dark Jedi were after it to feed on its power. The leader of the Dark Jedi at the time, Jarek, killed Kyle's father after discovering the coordinates. He then placed Morgan's head on a spike, and yeah, that's some pretty brutal stuff coming from Star Wars. Kyle then goes through the galaxy with the goal of avenging his father. Eventually he meets with Jarek in the Valley of the Jedi, where they both duel. Jarek tries to manipulate Kyle by getting him to fall to the dark side, but he resists and then promptly defeats and kills Jarek in combat. Kyle then continues to do missions for the Republic, and eventually a mission goes south. In this mission, Kyle falls to the dark side, and eventually Mara Jade, who is his apprentice, manages to bring him back to the light side. That entire ordeal shakes Kyle to his very core, and he then realizes that he cannot trust himself with the Force. He then goes to the Jedi Academy on Yavin 4 and gives up his lightsaber to his master, Luke Skywalker. He also completely severs his connection to the Force and vows never to use it again. And now that his connection to the Force was pretty much gone, he goes back to doing spy missions for the Republic as a mercenary, alongside his partner and love interest, Jan Ors. And this is where the story of Jedi Outcast begins. And just by reading a little bit into the backstory of Kyle Katarn, you can see why his backstory is so amazing. He is a character that has genuine flaws, but also realistic strengths. His motivations are clear and very grounded. Any average person would be able to relate to his story easily. He had to go through a lot of training and experience to get to his position, and he is one of the very few characters in all of Star Wars fiction that willingly gives up his powers as a Jedi and severs his connection to the Force, all because he is afraid of what he is capable of. Those are the actions of a true hero. The entire backstory is surprisingly well written. I would love to see an entire movie about this character. Hell, I would even settle with just a cameo, and I can guarantee that if they made a trilogy about Kyle Katarn's story, it would be infinitely more popular than the Disney Star Wars sequel, with its horrible and terrible Mary Sue Rey Palpatine Skywalker garbage. Now, with his backstory out of the way, let's talk about what happens in Jedi Outcast and what makes this game and its story so amazing. So the story of Jedi Outcast starts off with Kyle and Jan on a mission. They get contacted by Mon Mothma, who notifies them that the Republic intercepted some communications from the planet Kejim. The planet was once thought to be an abandoned Imperial listening post, and both Kyle and Jan are tasked with figuring out what is going on. During their investigation, they manage to decrypt a few words in the transmission, the first being Valley of the Jedi, and the second being Reborn. And as you can guess already, this mission directly relates to Kyle's backstory. As you get there, the suspicions get confirmed. This facility is crawling with Imperials. Eventually, this leads you into a room where they're holding suspicious-looking crystals. After slicing into the databanks, you figure out that the Imperials were conducting experiments. They found that these crystals are able to store the power of the Force, and that these crystals originated from the planet Artus Prime. That happens to be your next objective. As you land on the planet, both of you will then split up, which you will find later on that it was a very bad idea. As you go through the facility, you find that the Imperials were doing experiments on the prisoners themselves. Then you interrupt their facilities, and now it is time for you to get the hell out. As you're approaching the landing pad where Jan is waiting for you, you get intercepted by the main villain, Desann, a huge Dark Jedi, who is an absolute unit. He is an imposing and intimidating character, especially with that deep voice. I mean, just look at his size. I remember as a kid that this character used to scare me a little bit. He is also accompanied by his apprentice, Tavion, who you may know from the game's sequel, Jedi Academy. Then, to show that Desann is not a joke, he orders his apprentice to execute Jan. He leaves Kyle to live in despair for failing to save Jan, but that's not the real reason why he left him alive. Kyle, obviously pissed off, goes to fight Desann, and this is single-handedly one of the best parts of the game, because you, as a player, have to manually fight this super powerful Dark Jedi. Anything you do, any weapon or grenades you use, he will block, dodge, or push it back at you. Eventually, he'll start tossing you around like you're a ragdoll, and there's literally nothing you can do. What do you think would have happened if this game was released today? Well, don't answer that, because I'll answer it for you. This would have been a cinematic, essentially robbing the player of a great and one-of-a-kind experience. Then, Kyle, in his anger, decides to get revenge. He starts by going to the Valley of the Jedi. Again, he is one of the only people that knows of its coordinates. He then rejoins his connection to the Force, and is met by his father's spirit, who reminds him that he needs to be wary of his emotions, something that he has struggled with in the past. Then, as he leaves onto his journey to reacquire his lightsaber, Desann was waiting for him. This was Desann's plan all along. Now that he knows the coordinates, Desann sends his entire fleet to the area to absorb the Force within those crystals that he mined from Artus Prime. Also, Desann's dreadnought is called the Doomgiver. That is one seriously badass name for a ship the size of a small planet. Kyle returns to the Jedi Academy, and this part of the story is just masterful. From the level design, to the music, to the actual gameplay itself. You get to witness students training either with lightsabers or with the Force in traditional Jedi fashion. Eventually, Kyle meets up with Luke Skywalker and tells him of what happened and who did it. Luke tells Kyle about the history of Desann and how he used to be a Jedi within the Academy walls. He reminds Kyle of his past with the dark side and how he needs to be cautious going forward. And out of all of the iterations of Luke Skywalker, the ones in Jedi Outcast and Academy are by far my most favorite. Even though he's young, he's extremely wise and calm. He always approaches things with a level of maturity that you would expect from an older brother or a very good friend. Of course, Luke knows why Kyle wants his lightsaber back, so he prepares some trials for Kyle to pass just to make sure that he's mentally and physically ready for the journey. But the reason of the trials is something that the game won't tell you. Now, Luke knows that Kyle will succeed, but by getting Kyle to do the trials, he gets him to calm down, focus his mind, and plan his journey logically, which are the very core beliefs of the Jedi Code. This is a level of thought that went into creating the story of the Jedi Knight series. I've had discussions in the past about who my favorite Jedi is, favorite Sith, and so on. I always say with 100% confidence that my number one favorite Jedi of all time is without a doubt Kyle Katarn, which is usually met with some surprise. Why is that? Because he's the most realistic. He has been both a non-force using mercenary and a fully trained Jedi Master. He's worked with the Empire in the past, then defected over to the Rebels. His personality and humor is something that is incredibly relatable and honestly very realistic. He celebrates even the smallest of achievements the same way any person would.
Yes.
Not only that, the best part about this character is you can see some clear character growth as you progress through the game, which also carries on to the sequel. You can see him getting stronger, smarter, and wiser. He has to constantly struggle throughout his journey, which all started with failing to stop Desann. We have seen him at his lows, and we will see him at his highs. If we compare Kyle to a character like, let's say, Rey Palpatine, then you can clearly see the difference between an extremely well-written character and, well, a character, I guess. And honestly, the story just gets better after this, but that's something that you will have to experience for yourself. or if you want me to cover the entire story of Kyle Katarn within the Star Wars fiction, then make sure to comment down below and let me know that that's what you want to see. The more comments I get, the more likely I will be to make that video. Now, what about the graphics and audio, or more specifically, the art style and level design? Well, Jedi Outcast is a game that has a certain visual and auditory charm to it, and because of that, I genuinely feel this game will last throughout the ages, especially considering this game came out in 2002, and for its time the graphics were revolutionary, and even today they look really good. The game also has great animations, good quality textures, and huge maps that are quite intricate and very easy to get lost in, trust me on that. Each force power is unique and has a distinct visual and auditory effect on it, something that I still find to be memorable after all of these years. And the best part is, the lightsaber animations are flashy and honestly beautiful. Whether you're playing the game yourself or watching two people dueling, the game just grabs your attention with its style. The great thing is, Jedi Academy took all of the great things from Jedi Outcast and doubled down on it. They literally innovated upon their strengths, and that is something we need to see more of in this day and age. Now, speaking of the level design of this game is just masterful. The game puts an insane amount of focus on attention to detail. Every single panel or every single object could be an interactable object, and it is up to you to determine which one it is. There are no outlines or highlights that will tell you. To do that, you literally have to think like a Jedi and think outside of the box. This is a game where your lightsaber and your force powers are fundamental for progression. Now, you might think that the mission journal might tell you something. Well, guess what? It doesn't tell you anything apart from the very basic outline of your current objective, or certain things that you will need to remember. So, for example, in the very first mission, you have to remember 3 images and their respective colors. These images are located in 3 separate wings of the Imperial facility. Thankfully, the journal will automatically keep track of these symbols and their colors when you find them. So, unlike me, you won't have to draw them out on paper like I did. Also, each level has a handful of secret areas, anywhere between 1 to 3 to maybe 5, I think. These areas usually contain some uncommon ammo, things like grenades, and either a health pack or a shield pack, so there usually is always a good incentive to explore, but it is not a requirement to do so. And that's another reason why I love the Jedi Knight series, is because it never forces you, pun intended, to explore. But if you happen to do so, there is always some great benefits for you. Basically, this is my version of incentivization, which is basically getting the player to willingly participate in your gameplay mechanics by incentivizing them. Now, luckily, there are no side missions like in the sequel of Jedi Academy, so every mission that you do will be story-based. Although for your first time, each mission will take you a very long time, so chances are you will probably forget certain parts of the story. A good rule of thumb when it comes to the level design or the exploration aspect is if you're ever stuck in a certain part of the game, chances are you have to use your force powers or your lightsaber in order to push a button or pull a lever or something to you in order to progress to the next part of the level. A good example of this is in a map called Nar Shaddaa, which is the 3rd or 4th map of the game. As you're progressing through the area, there is a point in which you have to stand within a hovering garbage compactor. Now, this garbage canister is programmed to go in a certain direction, which is not a direction that you yourself can go because there is a force field preventing organics from going through. It took me an embarrassing amount of time to actually figure out what I had to do. So as you're standing on the garbage canister, there are these stoplights or these sort of switches with the blue light on it. All you have to do is to use force push directly on it to push the switch into another direction. This then relays you to an alternative path, and you do this one more time to go to the next part of the map. So when I say that the force powers and lightsabers are core to the exploration, I really mean it. And this is just only one example of so many other cases where you're going to be stuck and you're gonna need to think outside of the box in order to progress. Now let's move on to the gameplay while we are on the topic of progression. Now, the game does not feature any arbitrary leveling up systems or talent point systems. Instead, you will learn new abilities and improve existing ones organically as you finish each mission. They changed this up slightly in Jedi Academy, which I feel is a much better iteration, but regardless, the system in this game gives a proper RPG-like feel to your character progression. It's one of those things that I love most about this game over Jedi Academy. Now, apart from the long levels and the high difficulty curve with exploration, what else was this game known for? What is this game iconic for? Well, this game was iconic for its gameplay, specifically its lightsaber combat. But did you know this game also has a fully working first-person shooter aspect as well? Because for the first 3 hours of the game, that's what you'll primarily be using. Then after you get your lightsaber, you will never want to go back. Trust me on that. So overall, the game has a wide variety of weapons, which is very surprising in a game from 2002. Every weapon has a primary and secondary fire. For the most part, all weapons function very differently, so you'll always experience that little bout of happiness and joy when you get a new weapon and you try it out for the first time. The most common weapon you will be using is the E11 blaster rifle. That's because most enemies in the game carry this, but eventually you'll be able to pick up the sniper rifle, which is capable of incinerating enemies after a fully charged shot. You then have the concussive rifle, which throws out concussive blasts as its secondary fire, which can easily clear out rooms in seconds. You also have one of the funniest looking weapons ever made. This looks like a horn on a clown car, but this weapon is far from funny. This weapon shoots out electrical bolts that'll destroy mechs or anything mechanical in a few hits. So even though the lightsaber will be your most used weapon, these guns are still useful. You also have explosives like a trip mine or charge detonator that you can use to set up traps, which usually ends up in some hilarious result.
Find cover!
Now, speaking of lightsabers, if I was to describe the gameplay, it is a very mechanical experience. Each attack or force power you use is based on your direct feedback. Basically, you as a player literally have to control how you swing the lightsaber, and you have to manually aim where you want the force powers to go. And that is the beauty of an active combat system, something that thankfully even Jedi Fallen Order has, and I love that game for it, but it's nowhere near as good or as refined as Jedi Outcast. So let's break down the lightsaber combat in this game. So in Jedi Outcast, you'll have only one lightsaber and so will your enemies, but it comes in 3 different lightsaber forms or techniques: fast, medium, and strong. Now, as the name implies, these styles refer to the speed of the technique, with slower forms doing significant amount of damage per swing. This type of mechanical gameplay is the reason why the lightsaber combat in this series is objectively the best and very iconic. Just by looking at your enemy, whether in single player or multiplayer, you can literally determine which lightsaber style they're using, and you can then modify your playstyles accordingly. There is an easy visual representation of how you can improve from being a Padawan player all the way up to a Grandmaster player. Not only that, if you're versing a human, you can easily notice certain tricks or certain patterns that the player likes to use, and you can then adapt to it and use it against them, just like a Jedi or a Sith master. Now, with a lightsaber, you can attack in about 8 different directions, and it is completely up to you. So first you have your front attack. This animation plays when you're moving either forward or backwards. Then you have your left and right side attacks, and then you have your 4 diagonal attacks. Now, the key of Jedi Outcast's combat is to consistently move around. Use the Force to interrupt your enemy, constantly switch up your lightsaber form when needed, and approach from a different direction. The combination of all of these elements is going to differentiate between a Padawan player to a Grandmaster player. Now, I could talk for literally hours about Jedi Outcast and Academy's combat system and how good it really is, but I cannot stress it enough. If you are a Star Wars fan, you need to try the games yourself. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's something else to actually play through it, sort of like driving a fast sports car. Now, alongside this game's incredible lightsaber combat, its force powers are also a core mechanic of this game. This also includes being able to manipulate your lightsaber while throwing it at an enemy. So let's go through the available force powers. Now, as I said previously, you will acquire and level up each force power automatically as you progress through each level. This gets changed in Jedi Academy, and it's a system that I absolutely love, but I will cover that in its own video. So make sure to like and comment on this video if you want to see that. The more likes and comments that I get, the quicker I'll get that video out. So in Jedi Outcast, you have two groups of force powers. The first are your standard force powers that every force user knows, and I have to admit, I absolutely love the sound effects of these. They are so iconic. They're the same sound effects from the prequel, Dark Forces 2, and I hope to see the return of these sound effects, hopefully in some future game. So let's start off with Force Push and Force Pull. Now, each force power comes in 3 different levels or ranks. Force Push and Pull at rank 1 are fairly weak. You can push or pull one enemy or object that you are directly targeting. Rank 2 makes it a little bit easier. This allows you to push or pull multiple enemies or objects, but in a limited angle in front of you. Then rank 3 is where it becomes godlike. So for Force Push at rank 3, you can push multiple enemies with great force and from a larger distance. You can easily push them off ledges or even buildings as well. When it comes to Force Pull, the same thing applies. Your range is much greater, so you can pull enemies from further away, and you can pull them with extreme amount of force. And if you couple Force Pull with Force Jump, the results are hilarious every single time. Then you have Force Speed and Force Jump, and as the name implies, Force Speed allows you to move faster with each level. Additionally, time slows down around you as well, allowing you to get in, slash as many people as you can without really having taken any damage. Force Jump is just as simple as well. With each level, you can jump higher and higher. This actually functions very similarly to the jump mechanic in Battlefront 2 when you're playing as a Force user. So the longer you hold your spacebar down, the higher you will jump, up to a certain limit of course. And then finally, for the basic force powers, you have your lightsaber manipulation powers. This includes your lightsaber offense, lightsaber defense, and of course lightsaber throw as well. At rank 1, it's pretty straightforward. You can throw the lightsaber directly in front of you and it will return right back. At rank 2, it will spin around a little bit and actually go to your designated target and stay there for an additional second. At rank 3 is where it becomes godlike. You can press and hold the lightsaber throw keybind and it will continue to spin in front of you. And you can hold this for as long as you have your force power available. You can use this to easily clear out a room or to get to an enemy that might be a bit too far away. Now with regards to lightsaber offense and defense, the name basically gives it all away. At higher defense, you can then parry most blaster attacks, whereas rank 3, you can then pretty much infinitely parry almost any number of blaster bolts directed at you in front of you, and you can actually direct them back at the enemy. So if there is a sentry turret in front of you and an enemy in front of you, you can literally just stand there and not take a single point of damage and parry or deflect every blaster bolt at the enemy. It's actually really badass. Now, the second group of force powers are your alignment powers, be it whether light side or dark side. This is because Kyle Katarn is a master of both and regularly uses both sides of the force. This is something they briefly elaborate on in Jedi Academy, which is my most favorite interpretation of the force in all of Star Wars fiction, but that's something that I'll cover in its own separate video. So there are a total of 4 Force powers you can use in the single player campaign. Let's start with Force Heal. As the name implies, once you press the keybind, you will then start healing. At rank 1, you will go into a meditative stance and you must remain stationary. Any movement or attack you take will cancel the effect. At rank 2, you no longer need to be in a meditative stance, but you will still heal the same amount of damage over time. At rank 3, you can then start healing at a faster rate, but at the same time, your force gets consumed faster as well. Then we have the very famous or infamous Force Grip, or in this case, Force Choke. At rank 1, you can Force Choke one enemy and immobilize them for 5 seconds, but you must hold on to the keybind for the duration. You can actually couple this ability with Force Throw to immediately kill one enemy. At rank 2, Force Grip will now upgrade and will actually levitate the enemy in front of you, but they will still remain stationary. But they'll also take a little bit of amount of damage as well. At rank 3 is where it becomes godlike. At rank 3, you can literally move the enemy around you as fast as you can aim. Not only that, you can also smash them into the ground as well and pretty much instantly kill them. So you're basically using physics to, well, kill all of your enemies, and I can imagine that it would hurt quite a bit. Then in third place we have Force Lightning, which is Palpatine's favorite force power. In this game though, however, it's not as good. It is possibly the most underwhelming force power in this game, but still usable. At rank 1, Kyle will launch a single bolt of lightning in front of him. At rank 2, you can then maintain the Force Lightning attack, but your force power will get fully drained up. At rank 3, your Force Lightning then spreads in front of you at a limited angle, and it does a decent amount of damage. My main problem with Force Lightning is that the moment you press the keybind, it'll automatically use up all of your remaining force in order to do this ability, and then you have to wait for your force powers to regenerate for you to use it again. Then finally, we have the very famous Jedi Mind Trick, which is incredible in this game. So at rank 1, you can distract or confuse a single enemy for 5 seconds. And what that does is that you can basically walk past an enemy and they will not engage you in combat. They won't even know you are there. At rank 2, you can then distract and confuse multiple enemies for 10 seconds each. And then at rank 3, you can then befriend one enemy and bring them over to your side. The best use of this power, and it makes me laugh every single time, is to find yourself a stormtrooper carrying a rocket launcher, and you basically have to mind trick him and just watch the fireworks and all the screams that accompany it. It is one of the most funniest things that ever happens in this game and also in Jedi Academy. So if you do decide to play this game, you must use this trick at least once in your playthrough.
Put your weapon down. All clear. All clear.
Finally, what would this game be without its iconic enemies, including the boss fights? Jedi Outcast has a surprisingly diverse range of enemies, even for its time. So first you have your basic enemies, or your fodder enemies. This is mostly made up of stormtroopers and Imperial officers. As I said before, they carry the E11 blaster rifle, and once you get your lightsaber, they are pretty easy to deal with. Then you have your strong enemies. This includes the weakways, which carry a Wookiee bowcaster, the stormtroopers that carry rocket launchers, or the Grands that carry and throw grenades. And in this game, their throw is by far the most accurate thing I have ever seen in a game. I mean, just have a look at this. You also have the Rodians, and people ask me why I hate Rodians so much. It's actually because of this game. The Rodians carry the sniper rifle and are dangerously accurate. If you've heard of the Jackal snipers in Halo 2, the Rodians are exactly that. Just remember, those sniper rifles will disintegrate you if they manage to charge their shot. And then finally you have your Force users, like the Dark Jedi, who come in a variety of different playstyles, and also the Reborn, or the Cortosis Reborn, who wear full black. Each of these enemies have different aggression levels, and some of them are just significantly more aggressive and will try to rush you down as quickly as possible with both their lightsaber and their force. Specifically the Cortosis Reborn. They really don't hold back whatsoever. And this is basically where the beauty of Jedi Knight's combat comes together. These enemies can easily destroy you if you don't match or exceed their movement or lightsaber skills. It truly is a beautiful dueling system that is very pleasing to the eye when you're looking at it from either a third-person perspective, but trust me, it feels even better to be the one fighting. Now, back in the day, the main problem that people had with this game was that it took you so long just to get the lightsaber, whereas the developers at the time said that they did it for story reasons. And I have to admit, I actually am on the developer's side on this. I don't like the concept of just giving the player something that they want immediately, because that then diminishes the point of the mechanic or the interesting aspect or the weapon that you are supposed to expect. The anticipation of getting that, and then once you acquire it, is something that literally no other game in today's age, or at least in recent age, has ever been able to replicate, because most gaming developers just give the player what they want. Whereas in this game, you know for a fact that you're going to get the lightsaber, and the way that they accomplished that by using the story was actually very well done. And then once you get the lightsaber, the rest of the game is completely free for you to play however you wish. And that is something that I will continue to remember and love about Jedi Outcast. Anyways, if you think that Jedi Outcast or Jedi Academy are severely underrated games, well, you're wrong. Because there's another Star Wars game called Star Wars Republic Commando, which is one of the most underrated and underappreciated games I have ever played. So I would highly advise you to go check out the video that I made, because goddamn that game deserves more attention. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to force push that like button and use Jedi Mind Trick to share this video to everyone else. As always, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video.